Hey everybody, it is Romania Black, and we are on episode 6 of Death Note. Oh, R.I.P. Ray. Your fiancé is going to try to make your death not be in vain, right? So, episode 5 is not aired on Patreon yet. It's going to air tomorrow, along with episode 4 on YouTube. And so, I'm recording this a little bit ahead of when I usually do, but I just couldn't wait any longer. I'm like, after that thing with Ray and Elle gathering the remaining officers together in this hotel and Light seeming like everything's going according to plan, I'm like, something's about to happen. And this show, it's so fascinating. But I've got some comments I want to tie in to the episode before we start with episode 6. Stephen Husick, his comment, and actually Alexander Q's comment, sort of tie hand in hand together with this. But Stephen Husick notes that Light is masking the deaths of the minor criminals in order to keep the public on his side. And I thought that was really, really interesting. It kind of ties to Alexander Q, who Alexander Q was like, Light's killing these criminals who are already in prison. Justice has been served to them. So what's the point of killing them now? Why not kill the people on the streets? But as Stephen Husick points out, the deaths that Light is inflicting by them being prisoners, they're already people that the public eye is against. They're like, oh, well, they're imprisoned, but they deserve worse than that. They deserve death, you know? So Light is just kind of feeding into a particular portion of the public who believe that these criminals, that prison wasn't enough. They deserve the ultimate justice being death. And Light is just kind of appeasing that crowd and getting this base developed towards Kira. And yeah, like Alexander says, these criminals have already been dealt a form of justice, but Light, as Stephen notes in his comment, if Light just started mass executing people on the street that seemed to be criminals or doing criminal activity, but it wasn't proven, they hadn't been served this justice, then that might seem quote unquote excessive and cruel. So instead he's going to do it behind the scenes and slowly kill them all off, you know, instead of just outright making them have heart attacks and just die in mass. So I thought that was really, really interesting in how Light is attempting to save face and the means in which he is doing so, and how that ties to, as Alexander pointed out, this sense of they've already been served justice and this is kind of enacting a different form of justice upon them. It's very fascinating, right? So I thought that was really cool how your comments kind of weave together, Stephen and Alexander. That was really neat. Alvaro Frota noted that the image of Ray's fiancée, we're holding him in her arms, is very reminiscent of the Michelangelo sculpture. I was like, I think that's what it was, but I agree with you that that's what it is. And then finally, AJIN noted about the whole Ray possibly going to neither heaven nor hell, which again, the fact that he used the death note, I'm like, Light, you just made somebody unwittingly neither go to heaven or hell. I've been saying that it's like this limbo ground, like the Shinigami world, like a purgatory. But AJIN notes it may not be that. It may be like annihilationism, where they just don't exist at all. And I'm like, oh. So instead of going to heaven and being like rewarded, going to the good ending, or going to hell to the bad ending, the game just shuts off. You're just erased from the game entirely. You don't even exist. And I'm like, I don't know if that, I feel like for Light, that would be the worst punishment, because he has such an ego that if he were in heaven, he'd be like, look at all the great I did. And if he was in hell, he'd be like, look how I've been served in justice. But just ceasing to exist, I could see Light being like, no, that's like, it makes him seem like his life was meaningless. And it's like, oh. So that's fascinating, AJN. I'm going to keep that in mind. But I'm like, if they just sentenced poor Ray to like a null existence, well, that sucks. So he doesn't get to see his fiancée or anybody in heaven nor hell. That's, I thought it was the Shinigami realm. That's kind of like where they end up at, but that's feeding my whole theory that they become Shinigami, and I don't know if that's going to be proven right or wrong. I don't want to know either. I don't want to be spoiled. We'll find out as we go, right? But I'm very curious to see, now that we've had Ray's death, the first major FBI death, along with the other 12 individuals of the FBI, and now that the police is whittled down to just these 5 and Elle and Watari, we're down to our main squad. Where are we going to go to from here? So we shall see, won't we? But I'm excited to find out. I hope you all are too. So without further ado, we're not going to waste any more time. We're going to dive into episode 6 of Death Note, and we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's go. Oh, I've times since I've just been on the edge of my seat being like, is she gonna die? And I don't know. I mean, she is eventually. She gave up her name. Girl, what are you doing? You're so smart. Why? I was praising Shoko. I was praising Shoko Maki. I was giving her all the praise last episode, being like, I was just shitting on Ray left and right. And now I'm like, why? You're so close. That's the thing. The thing about these characters is that they're all so close. They're just right on the edge. They're on the tip of it. And they just miss the mark by a hair. And it's like, are you kidding me? Oh, that was cruel. That was so cruel, y'all. Oh my God. Okay, so this episode, man, there's a lot of luck in Light's favor. I will say that at this point. At this point in the show, I'm waiting for it to get overturned. Because everything is going Light's way so far in this show. Like, for a lot of things, like, Light has the advantage. It is like a god is smiling upon him. That's not Ryuk, but Ryuzaki. We'll talk about that, Ryuzaki. Funny that it's another Ryu name, right? Funny that. Doesn't that mean dragon? Isn't Ryu dragon? I'm thinking of Ryukin from Bleach. But we have Ryuk and then we have Ryuzaki. Interesting. Very interesting, right? We'll talk about Light. Or L. L is, I guess we should start. It's like Inception. You have Light, who's Kira, and then you have this other figure who is L, who is Ryuzaki. So it's just like name Inception. It just keeps getting deeper and deeper. But I always in these discussions want to confuse Light and L and switch their names just because they both have L in them. But I like calling Light and Kira something he represents. So I may start calling L Ryuzaki, but no, he'll probably be L. I say that. But this episode, girl was doing good. I'm waiting for, again, we talked about the Shinigami eyes and how I didn't think that Light would turn down the deal, but he did. But I think it's going to get to a point where he has to take the eyes. I think it's going to get to a point where L backs him into a corner. Because this episode has proven to Light one very important thing, and that is that people can figure him out. And he's not as infallible. His plans are not as infallible and inescapable of being caught as he has considered them. Because yeah, he comments to Shoko, he's like, oh, this theory you guys kind of forced. And she's like, I know, but my fiance's dead. And so this is what I'm going with because I don't know anything else. So that proves in itself that in Shoko's case, that, you know, if you are driven to a corner, people will start to just take any assumption they can make and run with it because what other choice do they have, right? And so, oh my gosh. I also like that throughout this series, Light is always put in a red lens. So his eyes, the apples, everything is in the color red. And then you have L and Shoko and this girl in the OP who are put in these blue tones. So it's like your two opposite colors that are red and blue. It's fascinating, but unraveling. So trying to unravel everything. I'm kind of a big fan of L because of his little micro expressions and micro gestures. Like Light, it's funny because Light puts on this image, this facade of being the prim and proper, perfect schoolboy who's Mr. Popular, Mr. Has It All, like the total best schoolboy, whatever. And then Kira kind of becomes what he actually is, like underneath all of that. And L, from what we've seen so far, has seemed to be this like commanding presence. But as soon as I was like, he's like Sherlock and Moriarty. Sherlock is a quirky character in his own story, and in all the adaptations, they tend to make him quirkier. And in true Sherlock fashion, L is very quirky and eccentric, which I like. I like that he's constantly like scratching his feet up against one another, and he's barefoot in a hotel. Yuck. I don't know. I'm very like, anytime I'm in a hotel, I'm like, socks are on because that floor has been stamped upon by who knows how many people. I don't think they've shampooed the carpets a lot. So that's fascinating that he just sits there scratching his leg. And he's barefoot. And he's wearing the most plain. I think it's important that he's wearing very plain clothing that is like no labels, nothing, just the most plain clothes possible. He's a very interesting character, L is. And I love how the police are like, you're L, the mysterious man who solves all the crimes. Also, you see his bare feet, but every other part of him is like covered up. Like his sleeves and everything covers up to where you can't see, like if he has a tattoo or something. And then he has this wild Mowgli style, wild unkempt hair, and his eyes are almost not human. Like for a second you wonder if he's almost blind. Like his eyes are soulless. There's like nothing there. There's no pupils. It's just a dull gray. And he has all these bags, like he just doesn't sleep. He's so fascinating. He looks like, I don't know, he looks like a Shinigami posing as a human. It's funny, right? He doesn't look quite human. It's interesting. I'm L. And they're like, aha, and he's super pale, like he never sees the light of day. And then, yeah, he's like, But honestly, if he's been stuck inside this apartment or wherever for years solving crimes without exposing himself, then yeah, if you've never socialized with people for years other than like Watari maybe, then, which we don't see Watari in this, so that's fascinating. But yeah, he's just scratching and kind of like it's interesting. He's different from what I imagined. And they're all like, what? And then immediately he says his name and shows his badge. So we have Matsuda. I'm going to write these names down. We have, obviously, Chief Yagami. We have Matsuda. We have Aizawa, who has the broccoli hair. And then we have Mogi and Ukita. And then Shoko Maki is our poor woman that... Her and Ray, they just underestimated Light. He's like, sorry we're late. And then I love that he's like, bang, you're dead. Like, you just goofed. And he's like, is this some kind of joke? And he says, if I were Kira, you'd be dead. Because you just showed me your face and told me who you were. Yeah. And he's like, you already know that Kira needs a name and a face. So why did you give me that information that I needed? Don't give out your name so carelessly. So yeah. Clearly Elle knows the importance of anonymity and keeping that identity a secret, right? Because he's seen what happens if not. And so I like that he's trying to basically, without saying, I'm teaching you, tell these five, be like, look, if you don't want to die, maybe you should be more cautious because we don't know what Kira looks like. He could be any of us. And even though I say I'm Elle, I could have been lying. So he's like, you've got to be cautious in this. Let's value our lives. And he's all hunched over. He just kind of like skulks into the living room area. But he's in a penthouse, so clearly he has the funds, right? And Matsuda says he didn't know about the whole name thing. And then this gets dropped, that criminals whose names were unknown or were broadcast incorrectly did not die. So it's just like Light has made tiny little errors that have allowed, and I don't think that was intentional. I don't think Light intentionally did that. I think that the police have that Elle just picked up on that and shared it with Yagami, with Chief Yagami. Because I don't think, it's funny, it's in the weirdest of ways, Light has truly been spared and delved a bone a time or two in this series already. But at the same time, Light has done things that Elle's picked up on very quickly that I don't think Light was intending him to pick up on. So it's fascinating that there's that give and take there. And he's just this little bow-legged cat. That's literally what he is. He's bow-legged, he's pale, he scratches his feet, he's barefoot, and he just wanders off. And then, of course, the table is a chessboard. Of course it is, right? Or checkers. Either one. And I like that old Aizawa gets upset when he tells him to turn his phone off. He's like, you think we'd have our phones on to leak information? And Yagami's like, just do what he says. Like, he's being cautious. And Matsuda's like, I still can't tell if he trusts us or not. And then Elle's like, no, I just can't stand it when people's cell phones go off when I'm talking. So we establish in this that, and some of you in the comments have been like, oh, you'll see that Elle and Light are similar. No spoilers, but I get it. Yeah. Elle is a bit egotistical too, right? He's a bit egotistical. The funny thing is that Light only really reveals his egotistical side around Ryuk, because he's forced to be around Ryuk all the time. And in this situation, L is basically forced to be around Chief Yagami and the others. So he's revealing that, yeah, I'm kind of egotistical too. So I just want you all to pay attention to me. Don't disrupt me. He's like a teacher. He's like the teacher that tells you to turn your cell phone off in class. He's like, let's pay attention to the lecture, right? Maybe that's why I like L. I'm getting teacher vibes from him, and I'm relating so hard. And he says, do not take any notes on anything we do or say here. I also get, if you've watched Attack on Titan, I'm getting Levi Ackerman vibes from L, not only in the way that he's like dressed very plainly, and I feel like Levi would dress plainly in casual clothes, except he has the little bib there, cravat, I think. But also his affinity for tea. I feel like I would like to see a crossover where the mangaka's Isayama and the mangaka for Death Note, they come together and draw Levi and L sitting next to each other drinking tea. I think that'd be very appropriate, right? And then we could have Aaron and Light off doing their thing, right? So, like, obligatory season 4 spoiler warning, we'll have, like, Light sitting atop of Aaron in his founding Titan form, like, writing in the Death Note. That would really shorten Attack on Titan very quickly if there was a Death Note. Aaron had been like, don't have to do the rumbling now. You know? All right, enough spoilers. But yeah, keep all of it in your head and sit wherever you like. And I like that Matsuda goes, oh, we gotta remember this. I like that Matsuda's the one going, I'm not good at memorizing. He just has this look of like, oh crap, I'm gonna have to memorize all this stuff? Okay. But that makes perfect sense. I like that because yeah, anything that is written down or that is copied or transcribed is a piece of information that Kira could get a hold of, right? So the only thing I can think of that will be problematic is if Chief Yagami tells the family any of this information, which I don't think he will because he's the chief of police and he knows how serious his case is. But if Light decides to be manipulative and he's like, Dad, we'll talk about that because there's a little hint of that later on in this episode. If Light's like, oh, help me, Dad. Oh, Dad, I'll help you figure out the case. We'll talk about that a little more later in this episode, but because I can see how Light would try to use that against his dad. But it's a way of that information not leaving the room. And also, if it does leave the room, then Elle will know that it's because one of these 5 has orally leaked information and is actively, it won't be an accident, right? It won't be, this is Elle's way of one, keeping the information in the room, but also ensuring that if it does exit the room, that it's not like, at this point, we can assume that Elle can't say, if Elle suspects Light, he can't tell Chief Yagami, hey, I think your son is eavesdropping and stealing and hacking into your system and stealing information from the police force. He can't outright say that because he has no physical proof that that's happening. But if Kira finds out information, if Kira does something that seems like it would trace back to the information that Elle has shared with these 5, then Elle will know, okay, Kira is acting based on something that has leaked to this room. There was no paper trail. So someone in the room, it's no accident that Light has snuck in or that Kira has snuck in and got this information. Someone's told him. So that will mean that Elle will become suspicious of somebody in the room. And that's going to be a mucky mess because they're already, their trust issues are kind of on ice and teeter-tottering back and forth. So that's going to be fascinating. But we'll touch base on that later. But I love these looking at all of them. He's like a cat and an owl mixed together. It's just like a griffin. But yeah, him pouring the tea. And I like that he didn't give any teacups to anyone else. He didn't pour tea for anyone else there. He was just like, okay, hey guys, how's it going? You guys all doing good? Like, didn't pour tea for anybody. No, Elle is not a house guest. Not a host. He's not a host. He's a really good house guest, though. And they're all staring at him. And I like that he's just, like, looking at his tea. He's so weird. But I'm, like, drawn to him. I feel like there's something... There's a fakeness to Light, especially in the facade he puts on as the schoolboy that's perfect, that is kind of like, eh. And with Elle, it's almost the opposite of that. Elle is just this genuinely weird person, but it's kind of endearing. It's kind of endearing in the weirdest of ways. I almost prefer him being this open and blunt to them than putting on the facade. I don't think he's put on a facade when he was talking to the police force. They just couldn't see him physically to see how he is. But yeah, and then he just adds a whole lot of sugar to this, to the point where Matsuda's like, what are you doing? And just like, he has the weirdest, I'm getting like Sex Pistols flashbacks looking at Matsuda in this. I'm going to take a picture and show you all and do a side-by-side comparison. If you've never heard of Sex Pistols, it is a yaoi manga and anime that I reviewed back in January. It's on my Janu Yaoi playlist. If you want to see me go insane, go watch that. But the artwork has these really exaggerated eyes and features, and Matsuda's face in that moment just looks very reminiscent of Sex Pistols. It's fun. But yeah, I thought that him adding all the sugar to the tea, him and Ryuk would get along quite well, wouldn't they? Because apples have a lot of sugar in them. Apples are very sugary and have lots of carbs and sugar in them, even though they're fruit and they seem healthy. They're really quite sugary. They're not the best thing for you, in all honesty. They're good for you, but not the best. So I think Ryuk eating all these sugary apples would actually quite get along with L and his sugary tea. And the fact that he's like, I wish you to call me Ryuzaki, not L. I want to know what Ryuzaki means, so I don't feel like that's a spoiler. Name, meaning. I don't think that that's anything. Okay. So there's a culture tour site that just has name meanings. Ryuzaki is dragon. Means dragon imperial. That's it. Okay. So it's a dragon. Sweet. Again, the whole thing that Ryuk is tied to it too, I'm like, I don't know. I get just, there's something about L that strikes me like a Shinigami. It's really weird, but it's hard to pin down. I don't want to be spoiled, but there's just something about L that is very human, and there's parts of him that are like almost beyond human. It's weird, especially his eyes. I don't want to be spoiled, but I have a feeling that when I find out more about L, I have a feeling I'm going to like it. So maybe I won't. I don't know. But so they're going to ask him to call him Ryuzaki just to be safe. Okay. So I know that a face and name are needed. And I like that as he's saying this, but again, L is crouched up on his hands and knees like Ryuk. He's crouched up on the chair in this position, kind of like Ryuk, listening to all of them. Like, it's a weird comparison, right? It's just bizarre. I don't know. So then Matsuda says, okay, Ryuzaki, if you know that a face and name are needed, then couldn't we cut down the number of victims by censoring the crime reports? And L's like, yeah, we could do that, but then ordinary people are going to start to die. And they're like, well, why is that? And he's like, because Kira is childish and hates to lose. L hits the nail on the head, like, throughout this entire episode. Like, L knows light. And he's like, childish, hates to lose. And he's like, I am also childish and hate to lose. And that's why I know. In that moment, I got Beetlejuice flashbacks. If you've ever seen Beetlejuice, where Winona Ryder, she plays Lydia, the girl. And she's like, something about ghosts. It's like, people are strange and unusual. They can see ghosts. And Lydia's character's like, I myself am strange and unusual. And so like that it struck me the same way. I'm like, interesting. I'm also childish and hate to lose. And that's why I know. So this is fascinating because L is essentially saying like, Kira is very much like me. Only so they're very similar. They're both childish. They both hate to lose. They're willing to do anything to win. And that kind of is reflected. Several of you commented back in episode 3 that L had basically used in Lind L. Taylor to accomplish his means. He used a criminal just like Light's been using criminals. The only difference at this point is that, to our knowledge, L has used one criminal, but we don't know in the previous mysteries that L has solved if he's used other criminals for that too. We don't know. So it's very interesting how similar Light and L are. But then the thing that is different about them is their sense of justice. And you could argue that L takes pride on the fact that he solves these mysteries and promotes the proper justice. And so someone like Kira coming on that's like him, proposing something entirely different, is threatening to him. So fascinating. It's like, that's why I know. And he's like, Ryuzaki, could you explain that a little more clearly? Chief Yagumi's like, we need to know. What do you mean? And he's like, when I used the TV broadcast to challenge Kira. Yeah, so he establishes that it was basically to point out that Kira was not afraid to kill someone that was not a criminal because he didn't know Landell Taylor was a criminal at the time. And so when he said he was in the Kanto region, that's when Light started focusing on killing the Japanese criminals, as if to say, so what if I am? To send a message. He's like, yeah, he's met each one of my challenges without flinching. And I love he has such, it's like cat eyes, but also like owl eyes. It's bizarre. It's otherworldly. What do you think would happen if we tried to use the media restrictions to hide criminals from someone like this? If we're trying to, he's like, you got to be careful. We're dealing with a sociopath here. And if we don't play our cards right, then he's just going to start attacking. He's like, if you won't give me your criminals, then I'll kill the ones who've committed lesser crimes and even the innocent. And what Elle and our police force don't know yet is that Light has been killing people with lesser crimes and the innocent. It's just not out in the open yet. They don't realize that yet. But if he kills Shoko, that's going to seem so suspicious, don't you think? Light's viewing it as, what luck. She's revealed herself to me. I can kill her. But I'm very curious to know if Shoko has any type of recording device on her, if she has any means of recording the conversations between her and Light. It just seems like she's, in the last episode, was perceived as so perceptive and a brilliant FBI agent. And I'm like, if she suspected that somebody was on his route and she just starts talking to this guy Light, I'm like, wouldn't she suspect him? Why would she give him her name? Unless she's at the point where she really doesn't care if she dies because Ray's dead and she's like, well, I don't care what happens to me. I'm just going to figure out who Kira is and out him. Maybe that's it. I don't know. But if she dies, that seems like it would be a very big red flag to the people like Elle and the police officers if an FBI agent's fiance mysteriously drops dead within a few days of her husband, who we suspect might have been killed by Kira. And then if that happens, then wouldn't people start like retracing her steps and being like, okay, who did she last talk to? Who did she last see? Well, if the police find out the last person she contacted that they saw was Light, and Light is Yagumi's son, and there's a means of him possibly hacking into the system, then that would make him suspicious, right? We'll get more to that later. The world is my hostage, and I'm not the evil one. Yeah, that's basically what Ryuk said. Ryuk said if you go along this path, you're basically going to be the only one left because you're going to be the only one you think is not evil. I mean, Elle's onto this. Yeah. And as those who oppose me and hide evildoers are, they're the enemy. And I love that we're seeing like Elle's really dilated, super sketchy eyes. And him like just like scratching his feet. That is Kira's mental process. Speaking of mass media, let's think of ways we can use it to our advantage. Okay. And he's like, how about this? So I love that we have Light and Elle just deducing ways in which they can try to outsmart each other. So U.S. furious over deaths of FBI, world outraged over Kira's antics. The leading nations sent a total of 1,500 investigators to Japan. It would be different from his recent experience with the FBI. He would begin to see that everyone as a threat. Okay. And when he's feeling cornered, it would elicit some kind of response. So they're going to draw him out. They're like, okay, we're going to draw him out and try to get him to come out and kill these people who are FBI that don't exist. Okay. And they're like, oh, that's interesting. Yeah, in reality, there's only 7. We make him think there's 1,500. So we cause him to panic. So, and they don't exist, so they can't be killed. So he's going to be trying to investigate people that don't exist. So in that investigation, he may out himself, right? If he tries to get desperate for information, he may reveal himself unsuspectingly. That's not a bad plan. And the whole police force seems to be on it. They're like, this could work. And he's like, then I'll tell you my thoughts on the Kira case. Okay. And they're like, and he has their attention. He like took the line, like reeled it out, and he's like, all right, let me reel y'all in. Like, he's got him. Hook, line, and sinker. Kira works alone. And so and he bites his nails as he does this. He was accessing inside information from the investigation before. And so why do you believe he's working alone? And then I like that Yagami's like Aizawa, let him say his piece. Let's listen to his entire theory first. He's like, Kira needs a name and a face to kill. And a certain degree, he can even control their death. Yeah, he can control the time and the actions that the victim takes before their death. With all that in mind, he just takes up the Sharpie and starts drawing on the table. Like, okay. And so this is brilliant. He narrows it down. He was like, okay, he entered Japan. Here's what he did. I'm assuming this is a dry erase marker. So he basically just outlines everything that Light's done so far. And just to test the limits, just during the 5-day period, he became aware of the FBI's presence and felt threatened. And he didn't know their names or faces, which he had to find out, right? So he had to see how far he could control the death of a victim to manipulate a situation in which that would happen. Like, he figures it all out and goes through it. And then he details. So, and I love that as he's saying this, Light, it juxtaposes over to Miyano Mamoru's talking and just shows them both together. It's nearly impossible to figure out whose files Kira saw, but I can't let anyone know. Yeah, that I made contact with Ray Pinbar. I love that we're going back and forth and it's switching from Miyano's voice to the voice of L. I love it. Mm-hmm. And then the bus. I like that Ryuk. So this is interesting. So Ryuk says, you're not using the Death Note today? Like, what's going on? As he's munching on more apples. And he says, what are you doing then? Are you studying for the entrance exams? And Light says, it's no use studying for those at this point. I said a few episodes back, right? A few episodes back, I said, it's funny that Light is putting on this persona of the schoolboy because now he's Kira, right? And so it's funny that he was putting on that persona because he wanted to keep up appearances that nothing was suspicious. And to him, it was just, oh, well, this whole making my new utopia thing, like I can do it alongside my school studies and everything. But now that things are getting more serious and this whole thing with the Death Note and trying to conceal Kira's identity is consuming more and more time, Light's like, it's no use studying for those at this point. So I'm like, why do you say that, Light? Because you're not going to a university? Because you don't feel like you're going to go to college anymore? You found a better calling? You found a better job opportunity come flying into your lap? You know, being a deity, the job description, I mean, are you meeting it? So, but that's fascinating. It's a subtle change in his character, right? He's like, so what is it? And he's like, I worked the most between December 19th and 27th. Mm-hmm. Within this time, 23 people died. And I love that it just goes back and forth. It's great, as we all know. And they're just writing it all out. They're writing it out. It's great. They were all wanted criminals and ex-convicts. Yep. Interesting. And people who were suspected of crimes. People obviously different from those that Kira usually targets. Mm-hmm. In order to kill the FBI agents, he needed to control those with even lesser crimes. He killed 23 people so that we couldn't tell who he used. He actually probably only used a few. And 8 days after the tests, to allow the FBI to gather information on the other suspects, he wanted to draw attention away from himself. Yeah, interesting. Okay, yeah. Kira was one of the people that was investigated by the FBI during that time period. Yes, that's exactly right. So when he handed out the files on the people that were being investigated, they haven't looked through them all yet. I'm assuming next episode we'll see that, but Light's gonna be in there. Light is gonna be included in the packet. So when they get across his name, what is Chief Yagami gonna think? Be like, my son's one of the ones that were investigated? What? So that's going to be, because that immediately when he brings up his son, if L hasn't noticed it yet, and I think L has, but L is trying to gain their trust. And if he just calls out Chief Yagami's son right there and then it's going to lose the trust of the entire precinct, because as we establish later on, Light has worked with the police on his dad's force. So they all have this preconceived notion of Light, like, oh, he's the perfect child, he can't do anything wrong. And so if we suddenly bring him in as a suspect, L's going to destroy a lot of credibility in himself and lose a lot of trust between them for even suspecting him. So L is seemingly trying to out Light without drawing attention to the fact that L has been targeting Light. Because I think L is suspicious of Light. I do. He just doesn't have a means to target him. And I could be wrong. Could be wrong. This is the data from the FBI. Yep. And it contains other important information. And he says, you can't take these out of this room, but, and they're like, it's amazing. And they've already like, if we have this much information, we can do more than enough on our own. Yeah, they instant, like, it's like you give students a group of papers and they're like, okay, we got this. And they start doing it on their own. And the teacher steps back and goes, all right, cool. Because yeah, as soon as Aizawa takes over and is like, let's split into two groups. One will trace the FBI agents and the other will investigate the heart attack victims. Yeah. There are only a few people who had access to info from HQ and who were being investigated by the FBI in the first 5 days. Yeah, only a few. Yeah, so, when Light gets outed as one of the possible suspects, it's going to be interesting. If he even gets outed, but I think at this point, you think he would be on that short list. I just think based on what L has been deducing, it would be obvious. And just L, he's like, does anyone have any questions? You guys are all just taking this on, right? And then Yagami's like, I have a question, Ryuzaki. You said earlier you hate to lose, but you've shown us your face. So does that mean you've already lost to Kira? And he's like, that's correct. The fact that I've shown my face and that I've sacrificed 12 FBI agents are both losses. But I will win in the end. Yeah, I love that he's like, I may have lost the battle, but I'm going to win the war, sort of thing. Oh my God. This is the first time I've laid my life on the line. So this case is really important to him. Again, I'm so curious. So curious about L. Let's show Kira that we're willing to risk our lives. And that smile! What the fudge? What? That may be the thumbnail. Yeah, that may be the thumbnail. The thumbnail of Light's smiling face. Again, it feels like a Shinigami. I just don't know. And I don't want to be told if I'm right or wrong. We'll figure it out. I won't be disappointed if I'm wrong. I won't be, because it's like a far-fetched theory that L is related to the Shinigami somehow. But just the otherworldliness of him, the smile, was he once a Shinigami that was reborn into a human? Did he have the Death Note at one time and now it's haunted him now that he doesn't remember it? I'm just so fascinated by L's character now, because justice will definitely prevail. Light has the creepiest looks when he is like all like menacing, but L just looks like the Walmart smile button. I don't know how else to describe it. It's Light's smiley face is creepy, but it's not endearing. You're just like, huh! And L's is like creepy, but kind of endearing. I don't know how to describe it. And his eyes are just kind of far enough apart. I'm like, I don't know what to think. Justice will definitely prevail. And they're like, that's right. Justice will prevail. Let's give it our best. And he just instantly sways them. It's amazing. And they're like, when I first saw him, I was suspicious, but there's no mistake. This is L. And even Chief Yagami is like, all right, this weird little cat man. Okay. What? He wins them over. It's kind of amazing. First off, in order for us to make sure Kira isn't among us, I'd like to talk each of you individually. And they're like, oh, yeah. And they're like, so he doesn't trust us. And he's like, it's understandable. It's like, no. Yeah, Chief Yagami's like, if Kira was in the Task Force HQ in the beginning gathering info, then chances are high that he's still here. I get it. If he remained, he's seen Ryuzaki's face. Yeah, even this is a risk, huh? Yeah, so, God, I'm curious to know what he's going to ask them all individually. Like, what is he going to question them to determine that they're not Kira? I don't think that's the reason why he's questioning them individually. I don't. I think he's asking them individually because he has a suspicion about something and he wants to confirm or deconfirm it, and he wants to gather information about it. Fascinating. But yeah, this little bow-legged cat man, he is so intriguing. And he's like, things have been going so well so far. If I had one more thing, just one more decisive clue. That's the crazy thing. L believes things are going really good in his favor, which they kind of are. Light believes everything's going good in his favor, which they are. But it's like there's one little piece that could shatter everything. One chip in the glass could break the whole thing. And it's just each of them want to find that one chip and do it to the other, right? L just wants that one clue that can link him to Kira. And Light, on the other end, is like, if there was just one thing I missed, just one piece of evidence that would come to light, then it would cost me my life. Yeah, I love it. I love it so much. It's great. And then we see, I love this little, the juxtapose of Light and Ryuzaki. Kira and Ryuzaki next to each other. Again, Light is very handsome. He's the handsome schoolboy. And L is just this like cute cat man that I just want to like take home and let him sit in the corner of my living room. It's fascinating. Just one thing. And he constantly bites his nails, which I'm reading Birds of Shangri-La, which is a yaoi series, a BL series. And in that series, the main character, he like bites his nails all the time. And it's like they do one of the characters gets like a psychology book and they talk about how like it's a sign of anxiety and like you're stressing about something is when you bite your nails. And so that makes sense of why Elle would be doing that. And then meanwhile, the one clue that you need, the one decisive thing is Shoko Maki, and Light finds her first. God, that's like she's the representation. We'll talk about her. So we got these end cards here, which is interesting. If a human uses a note, a god of death usually appears in front of him or her within 39 days after he or she uses the note. 39 days is so bizarre. Like, what a random number. Why 39 days? That's like over a month, but less than 60 days? Huh. So they have to appear within a month and a week. Okay. Randomness. It's the second one that got me. The second little note here that says, the second note on here says, gods of death, the original owners of the death note, do not do in principle anything that will help or prevent the deaths in the note. So basically Ryuk has to be like standoff. He can't encourage or stop any of the deaths that happen in the death note. That's fascinating. That is interesting because that means Ryuk has to take a hands-off approach. He can't physically write in the death note unless it's his own. So yeah, then again, tying back this whole thing about how Light is slowly changing ever so slightly, Ryuk says, did you finish studying? And he's like, yeah, it's all right. There wasn't anything I missed. So I'm like, does that tie to his actual studies, or is he starting to forego his studies in favor of researching L with the death note? That's the thing. He says, my biggest gamble was the bus jacking incident, but it's impossible to connect it with Kira. Well, it's not impossible. No, as he finds out, that's the thing. It's not impossible. And I've been wanting to know how Light would react to meeting someone that was the family member of a victim. And he finally does. And it doesn't exactly go how I expected, but I'm not surprised how it goes. And we'll get to that. But yeah, he says it's impossible. But we see now that it's not. Like, it can be figured out, right? That Kira can kill people with means other than heart attacks. Yeah, but Shoko figured it out. It just takes a leap of faith, right? And he says, if anyone were to discover that fact, it would be a huge problem. Yeah, which, that's the interesting thing in all of this. Shoko figures it out, and granted, she's an FBI agent, and her fiancé was involved, and she could piece things together. But if she can figure it out, then who's to say that Elle and the others can't as well? So I'm like, Light, you need to be a little bit more cautious. I think Light's being cautious, and he's got amazing plans, but I'm like, if you're just not cautious enough, it's all going to implode on you. And he's gotten lucky. He's gotten so lucky that things haven't happened. He has been so lucky that she didn't come at like a different day. That's the funny thing. It's kind of tied to fate in a way, even though Ryuk suggests that there's no, any push towards things happening. But if she'd come like the next day or the day before, then it could have been a totally different outcome. But as fate would have it, their paths cross, right? But it's all in Light's corner what he does now that he's met her and knows that she's onto him. It's all in his corner. And so what's he going to do? And he takes the piece of the Death Note with him. I guess it just regenerates pages, or it's just an infinite amount of pages. It doesn't ever run out. But I'm like, Light, if you don't think this through entirely, it could backfire on you and blow up in your face. She's like, that day, Ray said that he was going to Shinjuku. And she's just slowly piecing everything together. Yep, piecing together. There are 4 heart attacks in the area, like trying to figure it all out, right? And she says the bus jacker dies after being hit by a car. It's not a coincidence, because he didn't die from a heart attack. He died from the car hitting him. I love this like camera work of showing like this really like, it's very, very early 2000s. There's just something about that like shaky cam as it goes through a location. It reminds me of the late 90s, early 2000s. It's a choice, an aesthetic choice. But yeah, she's the clue. She's the clue that Elle needs and that Light needs to not be found. So, and Light is figuring out that his dad is not answering his phone and isn't at HQ. He's suspecting something's going on. So, but she tries to get a hold of them and they're like, we don't know where they are. No one's at the Kira. No, there's no one in the Kira Task Force headquarters. And he's like, no one's there. So, I mean, Light is smart. So he will probably figure out, I'm sure, he's probably going to figure out that they're with Elle. Which is, So here's the fascinating thing about all of this, is that he goes to give the spare change of clothes to the guy at the reception desk, right? He's like, I'm Detective Superintendent Soichiro Yagami's son, Light. Can you hold these clothes for him? And they're like, oh, sure, Light. I haven't seen you in a while. And he's like, oh, I'm sorry. And he says, remember, we solved that insurance murder with your advice. Yeah. And he's like, I was the receptionist then, too. And he's like, oh, really? I'm sorry. Just write my name here, okay? Yeah. So, and they're like, does this mean you're going to help out with the Kira case too? He's like, if all goes well, I may be able to beat Elle. Why did he say that? Why did he announce that? Why did he drop that? Was he just not thinking? What? There's just something. Why did he say that? Because she picks up on it, right? She says, Elle, beat Elle. And like she hears, I'm like, oh, what? That is probably the most baffling line of this whole thing. Why did Light say that? Like he's trying to get, because if they're on the case to figure out who Kira is, beating Elle is not the end goal, right? If he's like, yeah, I'm sure I'd love to help find a way to beat Elle. Beating Elle is not the end goal. It's beating Kira. So him saying that is super, I don't know if it was just an accident, if he didn't even mean to say it, or if there's a reason why he dropped that line there, but it seems like it was intentional. It either was intentional or it could be like the biggest blunder Light makes at this point, is just dropping the fact that he knows who Elle is. Because she knows who Elle is. So, but that should have been her first clue, not to tell this man her name. And she's like Ray. She is like Ray. She just gives it, unless her name is not Shokomaki. Unless her name is not Shokomaki and she's trying to lure Light to reveal who he is. Okay, so maybe if she heard him drop that thing about Elle, Shokomaki may not be her name, because we don't know her name. Shokomaki may not be her name, and she is trying to lure Light by saying, oh, that's not my name. You're writing the Death Note, isn't working. But we're going to talk more about this. But my point from earlier was that Light has worked with the police before. So that, if that information ever got to Elle, if Elle ever found out that Light had worked with the police prior on other cases, that is a huge red flag. That is to Elle being like, your son has worked with the police, has had access to police records, and knows the people involved that work there in the precinct. Like, if we're looking for a school-age kid that would have connections to HQ, doesn't get more red flaggish than Light. right? So, but it's just the fact of the matter that we the audience are able to piece this all together, but there's bits and information that we're finding out that Elle and the others don't know. And that's what's so frustrating. It's like, if only they knew. But yeah, she may be lying. She didn't tell these guys her name. She could be lying about the whole Shoko Maki thing. That's fascinating. And she's like, I'll be sure to give them your message. She's like, that won't do. It must be in person. And that's when Light's like, oh, my father's the chief leading the Kira investigation. Do you want to leave a message with me? And so she's like, you? He's like, they're probably busy. And he like puts on the schoolboy charm with her to try to get her to talk. And because, yeah, that guy's like, Light, you shouldn't be telling civilians this. He's like, but people are already talking about it. Like, and this person is trustworthy. Like, he puts on the charm. I can tell by looking at her eyes. She is a very wise and careful person. You've heard about the FBI incident and figured out there's a problem within the Japanese police force itself. That's why you want to speak directly to headquarters. Like, he just roots her out. And she's like, huh. But if I was as brilliant of an FBI agent as Ray talked her up, which she's his fiance, so maybe he was just talking her up. But if she's really that brilliant, the Elle thing would have been a red flag. The fact that this guy is perceptive and has picked up on your agenda, red flag. Because she seems like she's very cautious and not trustworthy of really anybody. So when he presents all this info to her, she'd be like, So that's interesting. And Ryuk's just like, and she's like, okay, so is it all right? And he's like, of course. I can't give you my father's cell phone number, but you can use my phone. Of course, it's no use if we don't trust both of us. If you don't trust both of us. And then I just love that this, again, the smiles of Light and Elle, the smiles of them in this episode. It's like, but the thing of it is, Light's is clearly fake. Light's is so fake. Like, we as the audience can see through that smile in an instant. No, it's just an act. What's curious is that Elle's could be an act, very much. But at this point, we don't know enough about Elle to know if it really is or not. That's the fun thing about it all. And I like that Ryuka's like, who's this cheery guy? Like, who's he? And she's like, thanks, not suspicious boy. And then Ryuk's like, you've led her along well, Light. And he doesn't answer him. And so then we do the stoplight in multiple scenes here. We do the stoplight and the do not walk sign. And in this, the light turns red, saying, which we could tie the light turning red to Light's character and the fact that his motif is tied to the color red and the apples and everything. We can do that. To involve yourself in the Kira case, you're pretty brave. And she's like, no, you think that Kira is, and then he asks what her name is. And he's like, here's my name. It's Light Yagami. Light as in the character for moon, and Yagami as in night god. It's a strange name, isn't it? And then she says, I'm Shoko Maki. Shoko for shining child, and Maki as in the space and tree. Ooh, it's just like that shiningness and the tree for talking about the Garden of Eden. He's like, Miss Maki, right? And so Ryuk laughs here. Ryuk laughs. I don't think it's her name. No, I don't think it's her name, because why would he laugh? He doesn't say, you figured it out, Light, or he doesn't say, oh, you've got her now, Light. He just chuckles. That's not her name. No, she's going to lure him into this, because Ryuk is just a spectator. Ryuk is just a fly on the wall. He is just watching. He is just giving observations, pointing out the rules, but him laughing, I'm like, he knows that that's not her name, because he can see her name and her lifespan above her head. And that's curious too. If her lifespan, if he used the death note, her lifespan would drastically shorten, right? So yeah, I don't think that Shoko Maki's her name. She just lied to him because she's former FBI. Oh, I hope I'm right. I hope I'm right and that's not her name. And she catches Light as Kira. Whatever will happen because of that, that's going to be, But here's what could happen. I don't think Light is one of those people who is going to is going to come out with the death note paper and be like, haha, Shokomaki, I've wrote your name on this piece of paper. Here was my master plan. Now you're going to die. I don't think he's going to be like that. I don't think that that's going to be what happens. What I think is going to happen is that he is going to try to kill her at some point, and it's not going to work. And then he's going to be like, oh shit, because then she's going to try to go to the police and tell them this thing that he doesn't want them to know. And we'll talk about this, but Light didn't even realize that. He thinks, Miss Maki, I think that Kira's powers enable him to control his victims before he kills them. And she's like, oh, I thought so too. She's like, that's exactly what I was thinking. Kira can control the actions of a person before death, but that's not all. If my analysis is correct, he can also kill people in other ways other than heart attacks. And Light is like, who is this woman? And Ryuk's like, I know, but I can't tell you. Yeah, who is she? And he's like, I don't think anybody's noticed yet, but I think that's what is going to catch Kira. Yeah. And then Light's like, I hadn't even thought about that. He hadn't. So I think that if he tries to kill her and it doesn't work, then he's going to freak out because he'd be like, shit, she's going to go tell. I've got to stop her from telling them this because this could be the one piece of evidence that they need to kind of pinpoint who I am. Oh my gosh. But I think Light thought Ryuk was chuckling because he's like, oh, he's got her now. But I think Ryuk was chuckling because he's like, that's not her name. Yeah. I hope I'm right. I really hope I'm right. Kira would make sure not to attack his victims when he's intent on hiding a murder. Yes, someone I know may have met Kira. So, and he's like, met Kira? So this is one thing I've been waiting on this whole series so far. And I know we're only 6 episodes in. I really thought this was going to be like episode 12, 13 before we even got to this. But he's like, Light is meeting someone who is a relative of a victim of Kira. And he figures out it's Ray Pinbar's fiancé. He figures out it's the person that Ray wanted to protect. And so he's like, well, wouldn't it have been better if that person had spoken? She's like, that person's not alive anymore. He was one of the FBI agents who came to Japan. And the look on Light's face, he's like, shit. But this is the funny thing. I said back in episode 1 or 2, I was like, well, when Light meets the victim, the family of these victims, he's going to, instantly regret things. No, he's just freaked out because he's afraid of being caught. Interesting, right? An FBI agent who met Kira. Yep, could it be? He was also my fiance. He said he witnessed the bus jacking incident, and he probably met Kira on that bus. And Light's like, Ray Pinbar from beyond the grave. Old Ray from beyond the grave. And she's like, what's wrong? And he's like, oh, nothing. I'm sorry your fiance passed away. He doesn't seem sad at all. He's just like, oh, sorry about that. And he's like, what makes you think he met Kira? And she says 8 days after the bus jacking. That's when he died. But she's not telling him that, funny enough, she's not telling him that she's former FBI. So Light doesn't know that about her yet. Interesting. Which is good because she didn't say she's former FBI. So if Shoko is not her name, then he won't be instantly able to track her because she didn't reveal that she's FBI. And so that'll be curious to see if he can find anything about Ray Pinbar's fiance. And maybe he can. Maybe it'll be a race against time to see if he can make it to figuring out who she is before she gets to L. But here's the thing too. This is the fascinating thing. Because Light had Ray kill the other FBI agents, because he had Ray do it, Ray opened up the file, Ray saw all their names, he had the access to the file and had access to the files and had access to the computer. Light didn't take Ray's computer with the files on it. He just took the papers that had their names of the 12 that he killed. So, because he had Ray kill the FBI agents, and because Light wasn't able to actually do the research on the FBI agents himself, he won't be able to research her name because I'm sure if she's former FBI, they've scrubbed all that. So, so she says the hijacker robbed a bank 2 days earlier. Yeah, and then he died in an accident. An unusual and rare set of events. And that look, that look that Light gives her, like, oh, you think you figured it out. Like, just, I think that Kira set up the hijacking to steal information from my fiance. In order to kill the FBI agents who had come to Japan. Oh my gosh. The hijacker died in an accident. Yep. In other words, heart attacks aren't the only way that Kira can kill. Oh, I love it. I love it. And that look, he just gives her the most murderous look. The most murderous look. And she's like, I've figured that's my conviction. And then we see the red do not walk sign. Oh, it's great. The hijacker didn't die of a heart attack. So that's why you think Kira can kill by other means. It's like, yeah. And she's like, yes. And he says, that's a bit of a leap. And she goes, I know. But it's just what it's like. She's like, it's not that much of a leap though. She's like, the hijacker was being controlled by Kira. And he's like, why do you think that? And she's like, I've been wondering about the hijacking ever since my fiance told me about it. And so we get this scene of them like later on in the bedroom, like after whatever. And he's got like the whiskey and stuff. He didn't name any names, but he reluctantly showed his FBI ID to someone. Yep. And she thinks that person, yeah, and Ryuk's like, oh, she knows! And she's like, it was a top secret investigation, so whoever he showed the ID to was probably Kira. Or was the one that let slip the FBI was in Japan. So either whoever he showed the ID to is Kira the murderer or someone that told Kira. And Ryuk's like, she really knows what she's talking about. This is the one thing Light was worrying about. Ryuk's like reminding us, the audience, being like, we should probably take notes. I love Ryuk. He's great. And then he's like, and I like that Light walks in a no walking zone. He's flustered. I feel like he's flustered in this moment. Like, shit, she's figured me out. Like, because there's a no walking sign and Light's walking into, or maybe it did turn to Light. Maybe it turned to walk and they're both going. It's a conclusion you came with your singular knowledge and your desire to avenge your fiancé. Which, your singular knowledge, Light doesn't know she's former FBI, which is fun. And she's like, yep, you have some amazing deductive skills, but you can't deny you have personal interest. Your argument seems a bit... Like, he can't resist. He can't resist, like, trying to say that she's wrong. He's like, you can't deny you have personal interest in this case. And your arguments seem a bit forced. And she's like, but this theory is definitely worth investigating. Yeah, it's funny because it's almost like Light is trying to be like, well, you only think this because of this and this and this. And I'm like, well, but Light, the more people that are in the FBI that you kill, the more people probably related to them that will probably try to pick up the pieces. So it's like, ugh. And your testimony will be very important to the case. And she's like, oh yes, thanks. If what you say is correct, Kira should be caught soon. Oh my God. Because Kira was the one your fiance showed his ID to on that bus. She's like, yep, that's what I think. Oh my God. And her face. Oh, so I'm like, ooh, it's like a cat and a mouse within a cat and a mouse, right? Oh, him just being like, the red and blue. And I love the bars because we're talking about like prisons and justice and they're like walking across the crosswalk, but it's like prison bars. Oh, that was close. If this woman had told the police all this before she told me. And I love that she's like in the blue, it seems. And Ryuk's kind of in blue. Interesting. It seems like a god other than a Shinigami is watching over me. Oh gosh, that face. I'll get that face. That face of Light. Oh my gosh, it's just, he's pleased as punch. He thinks he's got this. And then her with the blue hair, much like Elle, much like the girl in the OP. Oh my gosh. Oh. So yeah. about that. Oh my gosh. Interesting, right? Interesting. Yeah, I think that she gave him a fake name. I don't think that that's... Because here's the thing. So now, like I was saying earlier, I was going to bring this back up again. I don't think Light is going to outright be like, gotcha, bitch. I got your name on this piece of paper that I've got. I've told you all my dastardly plans, now die. I don't think he's going to do that because he didn't do that with Ray, right? He just killed Ray, and at the very last second as Ray was dying, he was like, bye. But I think Light is going to do either. I don't think Light's going to write in the death note in front of her and be like, this is a death note, here's what I just did, bye, and think she's going to die. I don't think that's going to happen. As arrogant as Light is, I don't think that's going to happen. There's either like 3 scenarios that I'm thinking of that's going to happen with Shoko, if that's her name. One, the saddest thing is if Shoko really just made a goof and gave Light her name and all the info, and Light's just going to kill her. That's scenario 1. Now, scenario 1, if he kills her, that's worst case scenario. But I don't think he's going to give her just a heart attack. That seems too on the nose and seems too much like Ray that Elle and them are going to pick up on it. That there's too many similarities there. So I think what he's going to do is he's going to write in the death note a specific way that she dies away from him at a certain time, like later that day when she's not around him, and he can make it to where there's an alibi as to why he wasn't there. But now again, Elle has noted that Kira doesn't have to be near the victim and can control the time of when it happens, so they could still connect things back to Light. But I think that either one, he's going to kill her with the death note and just make it to where she dies a certain way at a certain time. We'll see what happens with that. 2, he tries to write in the death note a death for her, and she goes along her merry way, and then it doesn't work. And he follows up on it and finds out that it didn't work. That's number 2. And then number 3 is he tries to like reveal his plan and stuff. I don't think that's going to happen. So I don't know. I think with Ryuk's laugh that she gave a fake name. But I mean, I would be like, girl, surely you are smart enough as former FBI to not to give out your actual name. Surely not. Either she is not that smart as I gave her credit for, and she's going to die, or she is as smart as I'm giving her credit for, and she made a fake name, and Light's going to figure out that he done goofed, and she's not going to be easy to kill. I don't know, but this episode was so good. I'm really curious to know your thoughts down below. Please, no spoilers. This episode was so fun, but now I don't know if I can wait a week. I don't know if I can wait a week between now and episode 7. Buddy. I don't know, y'all, but I'm really excited. So, in any case, I hope y'all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'm back next week with episode 7 of Death Note. Bye.